Hey everyone, TimaeuSS, and welcome to another Honkai Star Rail video. Well, first things first, I am in Japan at the moment with my family, so of course the upload schedule is going to be rather hectic. And you can probably tell the audio sucks. I did not bring my usual microphone and the usual setup, so bear with me, alright? Anyhow, without further ado, let's take a look at the second iteration of East versus West, where we compare the CN stats for memory chaos clears with the Pride one, which represents global, of course, and this has been updated, and I believe it's our second iteration. Our previous one was very well received and some really good comments. I'm going to just address here. Well, first thing is that some units that are free to play, everyone will have, just like Natasha, Astar, and Serval, but not everyone will use them. And this is basically reflecting how the stat is reported. You can see this is really high versus, of course, here Pride one, it's a lot lower, right? Well, that's because it's ownership stats, which means that if you take a look at the CN1, 99.5% means out of 1,000 people that have Locha, 995 of those 1,000 people will be using him. That's how the stat is different. And of course, most importantly, this is for the CN side based on only the 10th, the last stage of Memory Chaos 10, whereas for Pride 1, it's based on Memory Chaos stages 6 to 10. So, of course, I think for CN, it's more end game, whereas maybe if you go look at the Memory Chaos 6, you might see data that would skew the remaining of the data. But anyhow, let's just take a look. We're here to see what has changed. So for the global side, because they don't do patch to patch comparisons, we can see this is the 24th of August versus the current, I believe, 7th of September, and it's the new one versus the old dot one. So this is the skill point one, and of course, with the introduction of Dang Han, we have more stats. Now the first big five did not change, all right, in terms of where they are placed, but interestingly, Dang Han right at release is at 81.5% usage stats. That's really high, and I would even say that it decreased Blade a tiny bit, because Blade was previously, right, sitting at, if we look at the data, previously sitting at 94.9, where now it's 87.3. So that could mean that people found the newer Memory Chaos much easier with units that would use skill points, because the travelers would refund them. Of course, with Danghan, just obliterate everything. But the big five, still the big five, but of course with the introduction of Danghan, another above 80% ownership to user stats basically puts him at the very top SSS tier. Now, if we take a look at the Pride one, which represents the global, Danghan currently sits at 34.58% in comparison to the rest of the cast. But it's also very important to know he is the only DPS unit that has S+ ranking across everything, single, blast, and AoE, which is 5 targets versus blast, which is 3. So he is at the top of the DPS tier list, and it shows. At E2, he breaks the game, which is so bonkers. And I'm very interested in if they will show the Eidolons, because I know, yeah, here you go. For Pride, when you can actually go here, and you can take a look in Bibiter Lune, and I want to see, wow, look at this. 65% of the people have him on E0, but a huge chunk, almost 20% of the people have them at 19 point Eidolon 2, which is huge, because you can see Eidolon plus cycle, that's a new stat that is now presented by Pride 1. E0 puts you at about 9.74, but as soon as you go to E2, you're looking at 6.27 cycles. Wild, absolutely wild. Now, going back into the comparison, we already know that Dangheng is so damn good here, right? It's super strong. And of course, we have the CN putting him, oh, here we go, putting him at the very top. Now, everything else, I think we see a bit of a change. So Kafka went from 77 to 67. Seili also went down from 74 to 70. And Jingyuan went from 79 to 65. So I would say this is essentially because as Danghang got released, a lot of the other DPS units essentially just got put down, right? If you had 2 ownership, 2 hybrid carries as part of your units, and again, people that participated have to have cleared Memory Chaos 10, which means they had to have at least 2 hybrid carries. So most likely they swapped one of their hybrid carries out for Dang Han, which is why it pushed his usage to ownership stats much higher. So with the remaining cast, everything else looks pretty similar. Now, one thing I want to check is Japard, 75% down to 70.9. But if you guys play the new not memory chaos simulated universe, you notice that Japard is ranked really high again. All right, reminds me of the good old times when SU was first released, right? When simulated universe was first released, and it was our brother in Japard carrying everyone with the thick shield. So very interesting to see that. Everything else, I think support would be the same, like, and Silver Wolf actually got a little bump from 79.2 to 79.6. yeah, and everything else is all right. Asta, I think the usage stats went down a tiny bit in comparison to the previous one, so that's fine as well. So anyhow, looking at the global side, Luocha just proves to be so damn good again and again. Honestly, Luocha is broken, and I'm really hoping that Fushan will be essentially an alternative for people that don't have Luocha, because Luocha just does so much, right? The solo sustain capabilities, the dispel for both your teams and debuff and the enemy's buff is just simply too huge. And also, of course, with Tingwing at the very top of support, and it's the same. It is the same for CN as well. Tingwing is the only 4-star unit that is at the very first row, the SSS tier for usage stats, and it does show for global as well. #1 in usage. #1 usage. Now it's very interesting to Natasha, to see Natasha quite high, 42.7 usage compared to ownership stats versus 50.33 here. So all in all, I think the stats, I mean, I'll leave the link in the description so you can let me know your thoughts as well. I think the stats are relatively the same in terms of day-to-day changes and memory chaos to the previous one. But I mean, no surprise here that right at release, Danghan sits at the very top, 81.5%. And if you have used them in memory chaos, or even the new Cylinder universe with the new propagation, that's what it's called, the new propagation path, you see he is just so bonkers. And a lot of people, you know, they have him at E0, but even some people went all in for E2 just to essentially unlock easy mode. Now, I know a lot of you guys have asked me on stream as well, should I pull for Danho or should I pull for Fushan? Personally, I think at its current moment, my plan for the free-to-play suggestions did not change, right? If you saw my previous video, I talked about, you know, you can skip Danghan because DPS, I mean, every single new patch I feel like we get some form of fire hyper carry, and the next two, Jingdu and Topaz, I feel like they're going to be hyper carries as well. So what you're going to do is ideally pull on Fushan banner, and if you don't get Fushan, that means if you fail the 50-50, you get Lynx at the very least. Lynx is going to be super fantastic, basically upgrade to Natasha, even if you don't get Fushan. That means you have a Lynx, hopefully she can solo sustain, and then even if you fail your 50-50, your guarantee will be spent either on Jingdu or Topaz, which means you'll secure a hyper carry. Versus if you go for Danghan, then you don't get to Fushan, and what do you do for 1.4? So that is my personal suggestion. That hasn't changed with the release of the new content, and I did show my clear for, I believe, the Simulated Universe, the first one. We cleared it within the first 4 hours along with everything else. So let me know your thoughts. I'm very interested to see how, if the meta will shift at all. Of course, we had Danghan, who was really good, and 81.5% ownership is almost close to Blade, who just sits at the very top. And of course, not everyone's Danghan is built, right? And so might even take some time for that to climb up. So we can see what the next week's stats or the next time a memory chaos refresh looks like. But until then, yeah, Fushan I think is definitely top choice for a lot of the free-to-play to save up, because if you don't have Luocha, you know how tough it is. So hopefully you get that, and Fushan is also going to be able to help your hyper carriers and your supports survive a bit longer, and maybe that's enough for you to finally push Memory Chaos 10 if you haven't done so already. Anyhow, it's TimaeuSS here, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye now.